Day after day, we are surrounded by the presence of criminals. We are spectators to the deepest darkness in human actions and the bizarre reality that someone's suffering can be a form of pleasure. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Luke, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The horrible case of Cindy James. Cindy James was born on June 12, 1944, the daughter of Otto and Matilda. Her original name was Cynthia Elizabeth Hack, but she later changed it to Cindy James for reasons that will become apparent. Her father, a retired colonel from the Canadian Air Force, and her mother, housewife, raised Cindy and her 5 siblings in a home known for its kindness, generosity, and friendliness. Cindy, characterized by her special nature and desire to help others, pursued a career in nursing. During this period, her father had re-enlisted with the Air Force and relocated the family to France, where she visited them during holidays. During this time, in letters to her family, Cindy occasionally referred to an unnamed intern she had met during her studies. She claimed that the two had at one point been engaged, and that, after finding he had terminal cancer, the man committed suicide while the couple were on a skiing trip. None of her parents or siblings, however, ever met the man, and Cindy did not name him. In the summer of 1965, Cindy met Roy Makepeace, a South African psychiatrist 18 years her senior. The two married on December 9, 1966, the same year she graduated from nursing school. Despite the age difference, their marriage initially seemed harmonious, and they began their life together with Cindy working as a nurse. In 1975, Cindy's career took a significant turn when she became the coordinator of a day center for minors with behavioral issues. Her dedication and passion for her work were evident during her 12-year tenure at the center. Cindy's commitment to the children was deeply appreciated by their parents, who recognized her profound impact and devotion. A pivotal moment in Cindy's life occurred after these 12 years when she decided to seek change. She left her job at the day center and accepted a nursing position at Richmond Hospital. Around the same time, Cindy and Roy's marriage ended in divorce. This marked a complete transformation in Cindy's life. She moved out of the house she shared with Roy, found a new place to live, adopted a pet, and immersed herself in work to stay occupied. This busy new lifestyle was Cindy's way of coping with the changes and challenges following her divorce. It's not clear why she divorced Roy. What has been found is that at least on 2 or 3 occasions, Roy had hit Cindy, so perhaps the reason she divorced was that he mistreated her. Despite this, it is known that Cindy and her ex-husband, Roy, claimed to have divorced on amicable terms, even though he had physically assaulted her several times. They maintained that they still had a good relationship and got along well. However, 4 months after her divorce and the beginning of her new life, Cindy's nightmare commenced. In October 1982, Cindy began receiving numerous unsettling phone calls at her home. Often, these calls were met with silence, as if no one was on the other end, or she would hear faint sounds like breathing or mumbling, but could not discern any clear message. This pattern persisted, suggesting that it was not an error but an intentional act to intimidate her. The calls were made from an untraceable number, leaving Cindy in the dark about the identity of the caller. On one occasion, while at home with friends, Cindy answered the phone only to hear the familiar, indiscernible noises. After hanging up, she noticed that the living room curtains, which she had previously closed, were now open. Startled, she closed the curtains and blinds, but the phone rang again. This time, the caller ominously remarked, "It's silly for you to hide. I know you're in the living room." This incident epitomized the terrifying reality Cindy faced daily, feeling watched yet unable to see her observer. The harassment escalated as Cindy began receiving bizarre letters in her mail. These letters, composed of newspaper clippings arranged to form threatening messages, conveyed ominous sentiments like "soon, Cindy, soon, and you're dead." Additionally, some letters contained violent imagery, depicting assaulted women or a person brandishing a knife near a woman's image. Despite the palpable threat these letters posed, Cindy had no clue about their origin and had never encountered the sender. Fearing for her safety and unsure of what to do, Cindy sought advice from her parents and ex-husband Roy. Both her parents and Roy urged her to contact the police and file a formal complaint, which Cindy did on October 12, 1982. The police, in their investigation, interviewed Cindy's friends and family to ascertain if anyone bore a grudge against her or knew of someone who might wish her harm. However, their efforts yielded no leads. Cindy, known for her compassionate and helpful nature as a nurse devoted to aiding people and children, was widely regarded as a genuinely kind and generous individual. This raised the question, who would want to harm someone like Cindy? The police were unable to identify anyone who wished to harm Cindy James, contrary to expectations that the situation would resolve after her complaint. The harassment persisted. Just 3 days later, while Cindy was in her kitchen, a brick shattered her window. Understandably alarmed, Cindy immediately contacted the police. On their arrival, officers conducted a thorough search of the house, yard, the alley behind the house, and the paths between the neighboring houses. Despite their efforts, they found no evidence of suspicious activity or clues to the perpetrator's identity. No witnesses had seen anyone, leaving the police with no leads. It seemed as though Cindy was being attacked by an unseen force. A week later, as Cindy prepared for bed, she encountered another disturbing scene. In her bedroom, she found her pillow slashed as if someone had attacked it with a knife. Cindy again called the police, who this time dispatched a different officer, Patrick McBride, to investigate. He thoroughly examined the surroundings and spoke with Cindy. After their discussion, he expressed his belief that Roy, Cindy's ex-husband, was responsible for the attacks. Cindy was skeptical, finding it hard to believe, especially since Roy had advised her to contact the police. Nevertheless, Pat was convinced that Roy was the culprit. To enhance Cindy's safety, Pat installed locks on all the doors and set up detectors in her house. He committed to checking on her daily and did so for nearly a month. During this time, Pat and Cindy grew close, eventually starting a romantic relationship. While Pat lived with Cindy, the harassment ceased. However, Pat remained vigilant, continuing to monitor the house's surroundings. One day, he encountered Roy near the back of the house and confronted him. Roy explained that he was concerned for Cindy's safety and was checking to ensure she was not in danger from her stalker. Pat, however, doubted Roy's explanation and maintained his suspicion that Roy was the one harassing Cindy. After a month, Cindy decided to end her cohabitation with Pat, though their relationship did not immediately dissolve. Once Pat left, the tranquility that had settled during his stay vanished, and the unsettling phone calls, letters, and noises resumed, marking the return of Cindy's nightmare. On one occasion, Cindy arrived home to a horrifying scene: 3 dead cats inside her house, accompanied by a chilling note stating, "You're next." In an effort to enhance her security, Cindy installed lights on her porch to potentially spot any intruders. However, she frequently found her porch lights and phone line broken. Despite repeatedly reporting these incidents to the police, their investigations yielded no evidence. There was no sign that anyone besides Cindy had been in or around the house. Not even footprints were found. As a result, the police decided to tap her phone in hopes of tracking the calls, but the brief duration of the calls hindered their ability to trace the caller's location. After some time, Cindy experienced her first physical attack. She had invited her close friend Agnes for a girls' night at her home. When Agnes arrived and noticed the house was dark, she suspected something was amiss. After attempting to reach Cindy without success, Agnes entered the house and found Cindy lying on the floor, unconscious, with her hands tied behind her back and a pair of nylon stockings wrapped tightly around her neck. Agnes quickly removed the stockings, allowing Cindy to regain consciousness. Upon waking, Cindy could not recall the full extent of the attack. She remembered needing something from her garage, which required her to go outside, as there was no direct access from inside the house. It was during this moment that she was attacked from behind and strangled with the stockings. The only detail Cindy could remember about her attacker was that they wore white sneakers, a common and non-distinctive feature. Realizing her life could not continue in this manner, Cindy decided to make a radical change. She altered her appearance, dyed her hair, and chose to move out of her current residence, changing her last name from Hack to James. This decision led her to return to the house she had previously shared with her ex-husband, who offered her the place to live while he moved elsewhere. Although Roy's gesture appeared helpful, the circumstances surrounding it raised suspicions. After relocating to her former home, she continued to discover unsettling items on her porch, such as piles of raw meat accompanied by threatening notes declaring, "You're mixed," and "You are dead meat." These notes, crafted from newspaper clippings, reappeared relentlessly, along with the resumption of mysterious phone calls, now directed to her new number at Roy's house. Cindy persistently contacted the police regarding these incidents, and they responded each time. However, the officers were unable to find any physical evidence or signs of anyone else's presence besides Cindy's. This lack of evidence led the police to grow skeptical about her claims, suspecting that she might be fabricating the events. A grave concern since police protection depends on the credibility of the victim. Cindy had been enduring this harassment for almost 7 years, facing different forms of torment daily. Throughout these 7 years, the police, repeatedly visiting her property and finding no leads, started to feel worn out by the case. Realizing the diminishing attention and belief from the police, Cindy decided to hire a private detective. The detective installed special motion-activated lights on her porch, designed to illuminate the area whenever someone approached. These lights were strategically placed to avoid tampering, as previous outdoor lights had been repeatedly broken. He also provided Cindy with a walkie-talkie equipped with a panic button, enabling her to alert him, the authorities, and paramedics in case of an emergency. This device also allowed him to listen in on Cindy's surroundings, offering a way to monitor her safety. 2 days after receiving the walkie-talkie, Cindy informed the detective of her intention to walk her dog, leaving the device at home. Upon her return, the detective heard through the walkie-talkie that she had entered the house. However, shortly afterward, he detected unusual noises, suggesting someone else was present with Cindy. Faced with the dilemma of potentially alerting the intruder by speaking, he chose to drive to Cindy's house in an attempt to catch the individual in the act. On his arrival at Cindy James' house, he found a dire situation. Opening the door, he discovered Cindy lying unconscious on the floor with a dagger embedded in her hand. Between her hand and the dagger was a note, and around her neck were black nylon stockings, as if someone had attempted to strangle her. He immediately assisted Cindy, called for paramedics, and she was swiftly taken to the hospital. Still alive, the note reading "You're dead meat" was particularly noteworthy as it was handwritten, suggesting the possibility of obtaining fingerprints or analyzing the handwriting for clues. At the hospital, doctors noticed a syringe mark on Cindy's arm, indicating she had been injected with a sedative. When Cindy regained consciousness, she was questioned about any recollections of her attacker or the incident. Unfortunately, her memory was blank. She could only recall entering her house after walking her dog and being attacked from behind. Following the injection, her memory ceased and she lost consciousness. Frustratingly, the police did not pursue any potential leads from the incident. They neglected to analyze the note for DNA or fingerprints, nor did they examine the dagger for any forensic evidence. Despite the presence of potential clues, the police remained convinced that Cindy was self-inflicting these wounds and orchestrating the entire scenario for attention. The private detective disagreed with the police's assessment and believed Cindy was not responsible for her own plight. Considering Cindy's history of being harassed for 7 years, he found it implausible that she would inflict such harm on herself, particularly in such a violent manner as her last attack. Resolute in finding the truth, he decided to explore the possibility of hypnosis, a common investigative technique in the 70s and 80s, to uncover any repressed memories Cindy might have of her assailant. However, the hypnosis session was unsuccessful, leaving Cindy's memory of the attack as elusive as ever. The possibility that Cindy's ex-partner, a psychiatrist, might have played a role in her amnesia was considered. Given his professional background, he could have had the knowledge and means to manipulate Cindy's memory using drugs or hypnotherapy. This theory, while speculative, raised questions about the extent of his involvement in her ordeal and the possibility of his using his expertise to conceal his actions. Despite the hypnosis session failing to unlock any memories for Cindy James, the police proceeded to administer a polygraph test. At the time, the polygraph was a widely used investigative tool, despite its reliability being questionable today. It is understood that a person who firmly believes in their version of events can pass a polygraph test. Cindy underwent the test and passed, indicating she was not lying according to the polygraph results. However, the police interpreted this outcome as Cindy being too traumatized to provide reliable results. This interpretation was in stark contrast to their earlier stance, where they believed Cindy was fabricating the events for attention, highlighting a contradiction in their approach and a reluctance to further investigate the case. Despite the police's skepticism, they decided to re-interview Roy, Cindy's ex-husband, and a prime suspect due to his background as a psychiatrist and access to medications and knowledge that could be used to harm Cindy. However, Roy denied any involvement. He too passed a polygraph test, which further complicated the investigation. The police's interest in the case persisted, driven by the curiosity surrounding the unexplained events occurring around Cindy. To monitor the situation, the police discreetly stationed a patrol car near Cindy's house for a week. During this period, no unusual incidents were reported. It was on December 11, 1985, that Cindy was found in a critical state. She was unconscious, with a black nylon stocking tied around her neck and a puncture mark on her arm from an injection. Cindy was physically battered and bore cuts on her body, but was alive. Taken to the hospital, she again had no memory of the attack upon regaining consciousness. After being discharged, Cindy, understandably frightened, invited her friend Agnes and Agnes' husband to stay at her house. That night, they reported hearing strange noises in the basement. Upon investigation, they discovered a fire in the basement. Agnes' husband noticed a person outside the house, not on the property but nearby, and looking towards the house. The identity of this person remained unknown due to the darkness and the distance. When they attempted to call for help, they discovered the phone line was cut, prompting Agnes' husband to seek assistance from neighbors. The firefighters were called and successfully extinguished the fire. After the fire incident in Cindy James' basement, the police conducted a thorough examination of her house, but found no evidence, such as footprints or any other signs of an intruder. Consequently, they concluded that Cindy was the one who started the fire. Due to their belief that Cindy was self-inflicting harm and the potential danger it posed, the police recommended she be admitted to a psychiatric institution. Feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about her situation, Cindy agreed to the hospitalization and spent the next 10 weeks in a psychiatric facility. On her release from the hospital, Cindy realized the importance of sharing her experiences and suspicions to shed light on the ongoing nightmare. She gathered her friends, family, and the police to disclose information she had previously withheld. Cindy revealed that during one of the attacks, the assailant had threatened to harm her family if she ever disclosed her beliefs about the identity of her attacker. She expressed a firm conviction that her ex-husband was the stalker. The police, prompted by Cindy's revelation, interrogated Roy once more. Despite Cindy's accusations, Roy maintained his innocence, asserting that he had always supported her, even advising her to contact the police and offering her a place to stay. To bolster his claim, Roy presented a recording he claimed to have captured on the answering machine at the house where Cindy was living, which was previously their shared home. The recording featured a female voice, suggesting that a woman, not Roy, was harassing Cindy. The police's response to Roy's evidence and Cindy's accusations was disheartening. They seemed more inclined to believe that Cindy was fabricating the entire situation rather than pursuing leads that could reveal the true perpetrator. This approach led to a troubling scenario where the police favored Roy's narrative over Cindy's and hastily dismissed her claims. Roy further complicated matters by suggesting to the police that Cindy suffered from multiple personality disorder. This claim appeared baseless, as no such diagnosis was made during Cindy's extended stay in the psychiatric hospital. Roy's insistence on this theory, coupled with his actions and concerns for Cindy that seemed inconsistent with his claims, cast doubt on his credibility. The overall situation presented a perplexing and unresolved puzzle, with the police fixated on discrediting Cindy rather than thoroughly investigating the case. On May 25, 1989, Cindy James started her day early, around 7 a.m., by going to the bank to deposit a check. She also visited a store to purchase groceries and had plans to meet with her best friend Agnes and Agnes' husband. Despite the police's suspicion that Cindy was fabricating the events surrounding her, their investigation continued. It's notable that over the 7 years of Cindy's case, the police spent an estimated $1.5 million, indicating the significant resources dedicated to the investigation. However, there was a sense of wariness from the police, as if they were conducting the investigation out of obligation rather than genuine concern. On the day in question, when Agnes and her husband arrived at Cindy's house, they found it odd that she wasn't there. While an empty house might not usually cause concern, Cindy's situation was different due to the ongoing harassment she faced. Agnes decided to alert the police while they searched for Cindy at places she might have visited, like the bank and the store. Their search led them to Cindy's car in the bank's parking lot. The presence of the car in the afternoon, after the bank's closing hours, raised alarm, especially considering her plans with her friends. Approaching the car, they found Cindy was not inside, deepening their concern. They went to the police station to report the situation. Despite initially being told they must wait 24 hours to file a missing person report, they convinced an officer to investigate due to the unique circumstances of Cindy's case. The officer, inspecting the car at night, discovered bloodstains on the driver's seat and found Cindy's purse, bank card, and a deposit receipt inside the car. The receipt showed Cindy had been at the bank early that morning. In the trunk were her grocery bags and a gift she had purchased for her friends at approximately 2:25 p.m. With this information, the police proceeded to Roy's apartment to question him. Arriving close to dawn, they found Roy at home. He explained that he had spent the afternoon and evening with a friend, having dinner and then staying at the friend's house until about 11:30 p.m. Roy's alibi appeared solid and could be corroborated, leading the police to continue their search for Cindy elsewhere. The disappearance of Cindy James mobilized the entire city of Richmond in a massive search operation. Helicopters, dogs, vehicles, and numerous people were deployed in an extensive effort to locate her. The search extended to various terrains, including underwater areas and the port, encompassing the wide radius around the location where her car was found. Despite the exhaustive efforts and resources utilized, Cindy remained missing. On June 8th of the same year, more than 2 weeks after her disappearance, Cindy was found in the yard of an abandoned house, approximately an hour and a half's distance from where her car had been located. The discovery was made in a region relatively close to the initial search area, which was surprising given the scale and intensity of the search efforts. The abandoned house, situated in an area frequented by many people, led investigators to theorize that Cindy could not have been left there for the entire duration of her disappearance. The likelihood of her being seen by passersby in such a busy area suggested that she may have been held captive elsewhere before being left at the location. Cindy's body exhibited signs of severe physical abuse, including bruises, cuts, and a syringe injection mark on her arm. She was found with her hands and feet bound, and a black nylon stocking was tied around her neck, consistent with previous incidents. The autopsy revealed that Cindy had been injected with a substantial amount of morphine and another sedative medication, leading to the conclusion that she had been drugged and then strangled. The police's conclusion about the case was controversial and unexpected. They posited that Cindy had committed suicide by injecting herself with a lethal dose of morphine and another sedative, then walking a significant distance barefoot to the location where she was found. Remarkably, her feet were clean, and her shoes were not found nearby. The police theorized that Cindy managed to tie her own hands and feet and strangle herself with the nylon stocking. This conclusion was met with skepticism and disbelief due to the implausibility of the scenario and the lack of concrete evidence to support such a theory. Several alternative theories have been proposed to explain Cindy's tragic fate. One theory suggests that her ex-husband was responsible for the harassment and attacks. This theory posits that Roy's apparent compassion and offers of help were tactics to divert suspicion from himself. Another theory implicates Pat, the police officer who developed a close relationship with Cindy. It suggests that Pat may have been her stalker, using his position to gain her trust, and then resuming the harassment after their relationship ended. However, this theory is complicated by the lack of concrete evidence linking him to the crimes. A less credible theory is that Cindy was responsible for the attacks herself, due to a mental disorder. This theory is largely dismissed due to the nature of her injuries and the circumstances of her death, which seem beyond the realm of self-infliction. Lastly, there is the possibility that an unknown stalker, unrelated to Cindy's close acquaintances, was responsible for the harassment and attacks. This theory considers the potential involvement of an outsider who targeted not only Cindy but potentially others as well. Each theory presents its own set of questions and uncertainties, leaving the true nature of Cindy James' tragic experiences unresolved. And that's the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon. Day after day, we are surrounded by the presence of criminals. We are spectators to the deepest darkness in human actions and the bizarre reality that someone's suffering can be a form of pleasure. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Luke, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The Juan Fernando Hermosa case. Juan Fernando Hermosa Suarez came into the world on February 28, 1976, amidst the picturesque province of Sucumbíos in Ecuador. His early life was shrouded in mystery, with no concrete information about his biological father and his mother, a humble laundry worker, struggling to provide for him. Consequently, when Juan was just a year old, destiny intervened, leading to his adoption by Rafael Hermosa and Zoila Suarez, a compassionate couple longing for children. They resided in a small and tranquil city in Ecuador until 1982, when a significant change transpired. Rafael sold their farm, and the family relocated to Quito, the vibrant capital of Ecuador. Initially, Juan's life appeared to follow a typical trajectory. He experienced the ups and downs of childhood, marked by occasional erratic moods. However, a pivotal moment occurred when he was around 7 years old. A young girl named Gloria entered the Hermosa family's life, altering its course. Gloria, at the tender age of 14, unveiled a startling revelation. She was Juan's sister. Gloria sought refuge with the Hermosa family, as her stepfather had cast her aside. Rafael and Zoila, known for their compassion, welcomed Gloria into their home. As time passed, Gloria found herself alone with Juan and chose to share a life-altering secret. Juan was adopted. This revelation, delivered without much consideration for his age and emotional readiness, left Juan grappling with profound questions. Gloria's presence also brought strife into the household, as she frequently disparaged Rafael and Zoila to Juan. Her tales included speculations about theft and flight from their home. Gloria's turbulent and disruptive behavior made it difficult for her to coexist with the Hermosa family, and she soon moved on. Juan's response to this revelation was tumultuous. As he mustered the courage to confront his adoptive parents, tears welled up in his eyes. He posed the painful question of whether it was true that Rafael and Zoila were not his biological parents. Faced with the heart-wrenching truth, they had no choice but to share the details of Juan's adoption. Some people have the notion that criminal behavior can be attributed solely to the influence of one's upbringing. In this case, Juan's adoptive parents, though imperfect, made sincere efforts to guide him down the right path. Nevertheless, it became increasingly evident that Juan's trajectory was far from conventional. Juan's journey took a tumultuous turn as he spiraled into rebellion. Crossing the boundary of typical childhood behavior at the tender age of 9. It was during these formative years that he began a disturbing pattern of animal cruelty, primarily targeting cats. He would macabrely bring their lifeless remains to school, seeking to shock and garner attention. Unsurprisingly, these actions resulted in multiple expulsions from school. In an attempt to curb his unruly behavior, Rafael, his adoptive father, resorted to occasional corporal punishment. Yet his discipline never escalated to a level that could be deemed excessive. In fact, it was evident that Juan did not hold any lingering grudges against Rafael or Zoila, his adoptive mother. Rafael's work commitments frequently led him to travel, leaving Juan with more unsupervised time. Although Zoila provided some company, her hearing impairment and struggles with arthritis prevented her from being a constant presence. Consequently, Juan found himself increasingly isolated. Completing elementary school at the age of 12 was a significant accomplishment for Juan, given his penchant for petty theft. He had already embarked on a path of pilfering, selling whatever items he could lay his hands on. Remarkably, his criminal endeavors thus far had entailed relatively low levels of risk. However, at the age of 13, Juan became embroiled in a reckless car theft escapade alongside older boys. Assuming the role of a passenger, they initially evaded capture. Their audacious greed, however, led them to steal yet another vehicle, resulting in their apprehension. Juan's subsequent placement in a juvenile correctional facility underscored the urgent need for reform within these institutions. In the majority of cases, these facilities only serve to further entrench delinquent behavior, treating these young individuals as hardened criminals. The meager mental assistance provided took the form of disconnected lectures, falling short of addressing their unique needs. Ultimately, these facilities inadvertently fostered camaraderie among these youths, often amplifying the influence of the already deeply troubled. Contrary to expectations, Juan found himself targeted within the correctional facility, not due to his physical stature or menacing appearance, but as a victim of severe bullying. Physical assaults and harsh verbal taunts became a daily ordeal. Amid this grim backdrop, a fellow inmate named Luis Anibal, merely 2 months older than Juan, entered the scene. Sharing a background of financial hardship, Luis's mother worked as a cleaner, but he had not been placed for adoption. Luis's circumstances were even more dire, with an abusive stepfather, mistreatment of his mother, and his sister subjected to similar horrors. Luis Anibal found himself on a perilous path marked by thefts and altercations, eventually leading him to the correctional facility. His presence there was not the consequence of a specific crime, but rather a desperate measure enacted by his mother, who hoped to redirect him onto the right track, only to inadvertently exacerbate his situation. Extended stays in the correctional facility, combined with shared experiences and a profound sense of disconnection from mainstream society, brought together these young men who struggled to forge connections elsewhere. In a bold endeavor, they even hired a taxi driver on an hourly basis to impart driving lessons. In no time, they became proficient behind the wheel of a car, coincidentally a taxi. The prospect of learning to drive infused these young men with excitement, for it heralded the initiation of their car theft endeavors. Their maiden foray into auto theft involved a Hyundai Accent, a venture that left no casualties, except for Juan and Anibal themselves, who, presumably due to nerves, met with a road mishap. Providentially, their escapade went unnoticed, and they managed to elude capture. Their subsequent car theft also ended in an encounter with law enforcement. However, they had meticulously prepared for such an eventuality, carrying counterfeit credentials purporting them to be the offspring of officers stationed in Quito. It goes without saying that these claims were entirely fabricated, unbeknownst to the genuine officers. Fortuitously for the boys, they were intercepted by a sergeant and a corporal who were unacquainted with the officers they impersonated, hence readily accepting the spurious credentials. Inquisitive officers questioned the boys about the car, intuitively discerning that it was unusual for the child of an officer to possess such a vehicle. Displaying remarkable cunning, the boys explained that it was a stolen car their father had managed to recover. The officers, harboring suspicions, suggested changing the vehicle's tires. It's important to note that some may not be familiar with the prevalent practice in Latin America, where police recover stolen cars, strip them of valuable parts for resale, and subsequently lay blame on the thieves for causing damage to the vehicle. The boys consented, offering to replace any components with lower quality substitutes in exchange for monetary compensation. The officers agreed, and an arrangement that left all parties content ensued. This modus operandi persisted for a while, initially yielding limited results. While leaving a disco with friends on November 22, 1991, The Juan and his group took a taxi. Hermosa pulled out a pistol obtained through a guard, shooting the driver in the head and killing him instantly. One of his friends then drove the vehicle to the southeast of the city and disposed of the body in the Los Chios Valley, where the body was found by police the next day. A week later, Hermosa went with other members of his gang to a hairdresser where he usually fixed his hair, operated by a transgender named Charlie. Charlie invited them to drink at home, where they started an argument which ended in Hermosa shooting Charlie 5 times before he could ask for help. Hermosa's crimes totaled 22 murders, occurring in only 4 months, claiming the lives of 8 taxi drivers, 11 homosexuals, a truck driver and his acquaintance, as well as 2 others, earning him the nickname, the Kid of Terror. The victims were shot to death with a pistol, the crimes occurring during the weekends, which caused a panic among the taxi drivers and homosexuals who lived in northern Quito. One fateful morning, patrolling officers were alerted by what sounded like gunshots, prompting them to initiate a strategic sweep of the vicinity. Guided by the direction of the gunshots, they arrived on an almost deserted street, where a taxi was observed traversing the area. Reacting swiftly, the officers accelerated, overtaking the taxi and discerning the presence of several minors inside. Recognizing that the police were in pursuit, the young individuals accelerated, yet the officers were undeterred, maintaining their vigilance. And when they realized that escaping in the taxi wasn't going to be possible, they stopped and opened all 4 doors to run in opposite directions. They were only able to capture one suspect, and that was Luis Anibal. Luis was taken to the police station, and they began questioning him to get a confession, but he didn't utter a single word. Days passed, along with threats because the taxi he fled from belonged to a man who had been murdered a few hours earlier. Still, Luis remained silent until a group of boys came to visit him to see what was going on with him. This seemed odd to the police because they had kept this capture hidden, and only a few relatives knew that Luis was there. These boys, seeing that Luis couldn't get out, left the place. But the officers, seeing that the presumed suspects were minors and their profile matched perfectly, assigned an undercover officer to see what their next moves would be. Throughout the day, the detective saw that these boys seemed to spend the whole day together, hanging out in the streets. In the evening, they entered a nightclub, and more agents were called to see if they would take the bait that was about to be set. In the early morning, when the boys left the nightclub, a taxi passed nearby, and they stopped it. Several agents were already following the taxi, and indeed, these boys had the intention of assaulting the taxi driver, but he was also an agent, and practically the whole gang of terror was captured. But their leader, Juan, had not been with them. Under pressure, the boys confessed, but they claimed they were not responsible for the murders and that Juan Carlos was the culprit. Juan Carlos was the name Juan Fernando used to have a different identity as a criminal and protect his real identity. In contrast, Luis used the alias Santiago. The police began to investigate Juan Fernando Hermosa and found his address. At that time, Juan lived with Zoila, and Rafael was not at home. On January 14, 1992, in the early morning, several officers began to surround Juan's house and entered through a skylight. Juan realized this, grabbed his gun, and a shootout ensued. Unfortunately, since he was sleeping in the same bed with his mother, and she may not have heard due to her deafness, she stayed in bed. In the exchange of fire, Zoila was hit by 19 bullets, leading to her death. Juan attempted to escape, threw a grenade at the police, and when he was climbing out of a window to escape, he was captured. Subsequently, following Juan's grenade launch, testimonies surfaced from both Juan and the neighbors, attesting that it was, in fact, the police who had lobbed the grenade. Countless enigmas envelop the circumstances leading to Zoila's tragic fate. It raises questions about why she was swiftly transported away in an ambulance when it was patently evident that she had already departed from this world. Standard procedure dictates that when someone is unmistakably deceased, they should remain at the scene for forensic evaluation. Upon his arrival at the police precinct, Juan unambiguously declared, as I quote, "I want to clarify that my name is Juan Fernando Hermoso Suarez, and on February 28th, I will celebrate my 16th birthday." This stratagem was employed to exploit legal provisions, given his status as a minor, and it elicited an explosion of media coverage. Juan ascended to a newfound level of notoriety, capturing the headlines in every newspaper. On numerous occasions, he participated in interviews for which he received compensation. Juan took all the blame for himself and wanted to leave his companions out of it. However, seeing that he also didn't want to receive many years in prison, he began to create excuses, claiming that a supposed general, who does exist, had hired him to commit all these crimes because of the death of his daughter, which was attributed to a supposed taxi driver. This was taken seriously because the other kids also started saying the same thing. The authorities were so stirred by this that they seriously began to investigate the general. They asked these kids about how he looked, and they said he was of average height and had prominent hair, but that wasn't accurate. He was tall and always had a military haircut. It also makes perfect sense that a general with all the connections in the world would hire a 15-year-old kid like Juan, who was a complete stranger. The authorities dismissed the accusations, and Juan began to make more excuses. Now he claimed that the taxi drivers were responsible for their own deaths. Clearly, he was still a child. He insisted that the last thing he wanted was to kill. He stated, "I asked them to stay still, that nothing would happen to them. But that didn't happen. Once again, I was threatened with a revolver, so I used my weapon. And a taxi driver tried to hit me with a lug wrench, so I was also forced to shoot." But even if that were true, this excuse wouldn't hold up because he had murdered 22 people by that point. There was no way he could be saved because he was young. It's not like he was suddenly going to turn his life around, and Juan confirmed this. At the time of his trial, Juan was already 16 years old and was sentenced to just 4 years at an orientation center because that was the maximum penalty for a minor in Ecuador. Juan underwent several psychological exams, which mostly described him as an organized psychopath. This type of psychopath tends to be natural leaders, and it was within 16 months of being in that center that Juan formed a gang and devised a plan to escape. He had a girl who had accompanied him in a previous taxi robbery arranged to meet him on the day of his visits. They had agreed that she would deliver a pistol to him so he could escape. In a juvenile center, the security wasn't as high, and Juan knew that at some point there would only be one guard watching the exit. When this happened, he seized the opportunity and shot the sole remaining guard with 5 shots, causing his death. Immediately, Juan and 10 other young people managed to escape from there. The news once again exploded, and somehow, Juan quickly managed to escape to Colombia. Reaching Bogota, he began to live off the sale of stolen jewelry, but being in a new country where he was also being pursued, he couldn't steal as easily as he could in Ecuador. So shortly after he was found, and tired of going hungry, he told the police, "Yes, I am Juan Fernando Hermoso," and he was sent back to Ecuador. He was temporarily placed in a high-security cell, but was soon returned to the same orientation center from which he had escaped before. However, this time, he didn't escape again. He didn't even serve the initial 4-year sentence they had given him, despite having killed a guard and escaped to Colombia. Many couldn't believe it, but in January 1996, Juan was already free. And this obviously caused a lot of resentment in many people who saw the judicial system as a failure. Juan returned to his childhood town, where he began to live with Rafael. In the early days, Juan seemed enthusiastic about finding a job, but no one wanted to hire him until Rafael contacted a friend who could give Juan a job in a bus collecting money. He started working and gradually began to enjoy the nightlife again, although it is assumed that he only went out to party and consume alcohol. On February 26, 1996, Juan had gone out with some friends to a bar around 10 p.m. At 12, the bar owner asked him to leave because the more the other customers consumed alcohol, the more they expressed their disgust for Juan, as his face and what he had done were known throughout the country. He had no choice but to board a bus and leave. 2 days later, Rafael received a call from the police, informing him that they had found what appeared to be his son's body near a river. The body was unrecognizable, not due to decomposition, but because it had been beaten, tortured, and assaulted in every possible way, even run over by a car, with his hands tied with wire. He was only identified as Juan because he had his identification in his pockets, and next to the body, they had left a newspaper clipping that said, "The Hermoso Syndrome throughout the country." The body was found on the same day that Juan was supposed to turn 20. Some say that the perpetrators were contacts of the officers he had deals with, but it could have been anyone because this young man had made enemies from all sides. And that's the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon.